Welcome back to Scarlet and Maize. I'm Adam. This is Zach.
How's it going?
We're going to switch things up a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit basketball, attrition, and addition. And then our top 5 running backs of all time from Michigan, from Ohio State. And then our top 3 performances in the game. Mm-hmm. And tweet of the week.
And a little bit about the draft.
And a little bit about the draft, too. But starting out, Michigan, attrition and addition. So Hunter Dickinson said he's 100% back. Musa Diabate and Caleb Houston both said they're going to the draft, but keeping their eligibility. They have about a month to decide for sure. Brandon Johns and Zeb Jackson both went to VCU. Frankie Collins left. Okay. And Michigan got in Jalen Llewellyn. So that's fun. Smart guy. There's rumors of them adding another person, but I don't know anything. So
yeah,
that's what it is. Freshman class is ranked 10th nationally. According to 24/7, they have Terrace Reed, 35th overall, who's a big guy. They have a wing, Jet Howard, 37th nationally. Tiny little point guard, Doug McDaniel. And then power forward, small forward, Greg Glenn. McDaniel is 64th overall. Greg Glenn is 103rd. He's kind of viewed more as a project type. He won't play right away. But especially because Frankie Collins transferred out. They apparently recruited Jalen Llewellyn as a point guard. He's like a combo guard, but they were pitching him as a point guard. So Doug McDaniel will probably be the backup point guard unless Kobe Buffkin also slides down. But they don't have many guards right now, so they're going to need Kobe Buffkin to play the 2. It's kind of a mess a little bit. They need another guy from the portal would be sweet. Terrace Reed will probably back up Hunter Dickinson, especially if Diabate stays gone. But there's a lot of fluidity. It's like Michigan could be really good again, but they also could be one injury away from disaster if it's a guard that goes down.
Yeah.
Or if Jalen Llewellyn doesn't transfer up well. So we'll see. What about what's going on with Ohio State?
So Malachi Branham just recently announced he's officially all in for the draft. He signed an agent, so he will not be coming back to the Buckeyes.
Good.
E.J. Liddell was already there, had an agent. Michi Johnson, Justin Arns are both in the portal. Arns is good riddance. When you have a 3-and-D guy that wasn't shooting the ball well down the stretch and can't play defense, it's hard to want him on your team. Michi Johnson, I think the way he worded it made it seem like there's a chance he could come back to Ohio State even though he's in the portal, but he hasn't made any decisions yet. He's a solid young player, so it'd be cool to have him back, but also sad to see him leave if he leaves. Yeah. They already have 2 transfers committed, and Tanner Holden, who averaged 20-plus points a game at Wright State this year, and Sean McNeil, who averaged 12-ish points a game at West Virginia. Couple solid transfers already. And then they have the 7th ranked freshman class nationally, according to 24/7, with point guard Bruce Thornton, who's 42nd. Felix Okpra, who is a center, and he's 50th. Roddy Gale Jr., who's 59th. He's a shooting guard. And Bryce Sanzamba, who's a small forward, 61st nationally. Really good class. And then there's a shooting guard. He's 301st nationally. I don't know if they just had another scholarship and were like, come on in. Or, if they think maybe he's a gem that nobody...
Spike Albrecht
people are overlooking him. I don't know.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy jump from 61st to 301st as your 4th and 5th best player in the class. But
it would probably be hard to get a 5th player ranked that high.
True. But, yeah. But I think Ohio State with Branham and Liddell leaving, it'll be hard to see him having high expectations next year. But I think they'll have a decent team. Seth Towns announced he's coming back for his 7th season. Justice Suing announced that he's coming back for maybe his 5th season. I'm not sure, but he'll be back. Those are a couple scorers that they definitely needed to be back to have a solid year. But it'll be interesting the way everything kind of sizzles out and figures out where the lineup will look. But interesting right now.
All right, so
Sorry.
the NFL draft happened,
Uh-huh.
and you came up with the player from each of our schools that got drafted that we're most excited about. We're going to follow his career the closest.
Yeah.
Who do you got?
It's hard to choose between the two guys that won the first round, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson was one guy that I saw his highlight film from high school and was like, this guy's going to be a household name someday. He went top 10 in the draft. And so, like, those two guys I've loved since Chris Olave's breakout game against Michigan as a freshman where he had a couple touchdowns and a block punt. Just a couple players I've been in love with for a long time now. But I'll have to say Chris Olave. I just really like the Saints seem to love Buckeyes and draft a lot of Buckeyes. And so I think I'll follow his career the most because I follow the Saints a decent amount just because they have a lot of Buckeyes already on the team. I think it'll be cool if Michael Thomas can be healthy. That 1-2 punch could be really exciting.
Yeah. For me, so right away, I just thought Aiden Hutchinson, except he plays for the Lions. I'm not like the NFL, the NBA, they're fine. It's harder for me to care. I like Michigan, so I follow Michigan guys. But
Yeah.
I also just know that the Lions suck. It's like maybe he helps them turn it around. I do like. I think their coach is fun. Just from his introductory press conference,
A lot of
the
people
players seem to like him.
A lot of people are giving them an A+ on their draft this year. So.
Yeah. But I also love Hassan Haskins being the backup in Tennessee.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Jordan Poole studying under Steph Curry. Maybe Hassan Haskins studying under Derrick Henry will be good for his career.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, I have one stat before we move on.
Yeah.
Well, a couple stats. Ohio State had 6 players drafted this year, which was the least they've had in the last 7 years, but was still more than Michigan. And also, since 2009, Michigan has had more players drafted than Ohio State once, and that was in 2017.
Since Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke were the coaches. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Harbaugh hasn't caught up, obviously, but, you know, those two really did a number on Michigan. That's fun.
Yeah.
You came up with, during this offseason, coming up with some top 5 lists of our favorite players from each of our schools. Today we're doing top 5 running backs of all time. So I have Michigan, obviously. You have Ohio State. I surprised myself when I sat down and looked at numbers. So you might think, given my age or what you think my age is, that Mike Hart would be the runaway number 1. And I'm not going to spoil or anything, but he's not the runaway number 1 for me, which is crazy.
He might be number 1, though. Just not runaway?
He might be, just not runaway.
We'll find out.
We'll find out.
My number 1's obvious, but we'll find out.
Yeah, yours is a little easier up top. But my number 5, this was a surprising stat to you, the only Michigan running back to win the Heisman
Yeah, that's crazy.
ever. This is back
I don't know how many Ohio State's had win the Heisman, but
more than one.
More than one, for sure.
This is back when they played 8 games. So the stats are kind of underwhelming at first. But 2,235 yards from scrimmage in his career. 852 rushing yards in his Heisman season. Again, only 8 games. So 852 rushing yards. He also had 506 passing yards.
Wow.
15 rushing touchdowns, 6 passing touchdowns. He was a back-to-back All-American in 1939 and 1940. In 1940, he also won the Maxwell AP Player of the Year, Big Ten Player of the Year, and the Heisman. He is the only person in NCAA history to lead the nation in scoring in both 1939 and 1940. Not just those 2 years. He's the only player to ever do it in back-to-back years. In 1940, he had 5 touchdowns total, kicked 4 extra points. There's a little bit more. We'll talk about him later. Got a standing ovation in Columbus from the Ohio State fans as he left the field, Mr. Tom Harmon.
Wow.
Just legend.
Number 5 for me is a player that finished number 2 all-time career rushing yards. He jumped on the scene week 1 as a freshman, and I was thrown off and didn't expect it because I was expecting Mike Weber to be there. But he He's the only Ohio State running back to ever rush for more than 2,000 yards in a season. He did that his junior year before he got drafted. J.K. Dobbins had 4,459 rushing yards, averaged 6.2 yards per carry, and had 38 rushing touchdowns. Just an amazing career, and I had to put him on there just because he's number 2 all time in the rushing yards. And recency bias, I don't know. I just loved watching him run the ball. He was really good.
He was really good. I'm going to get PTSD listening to your list. Number 4 for me, Chris Perry from 2000 to 2003. He rushed for 4,226 yards. That's just yards from scrimmage. He went 2-2 against Ohio State. That had to factor into my list. More on that later. But in his career, 3,657 rushing yards, 4.6 yards per carry, 39 rushing touchdowns. Sir Chris Perry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Number 4 for me is a bit of an older guy. He averaged over 100 yards per game his senior year, the year he won the Heisman. I didn't come up with his career stats because they just weren't that. They didn't jump out to me that much because they only played 8 or 9 games then. And the stat that jumped out to me was he won the Heisman. First of all, he's a running back that won the Heisman, so I felt like it deserved to be on the list. Mm-hmm. But he also played defensive back, and in his career, in 4 years in his career, never allowed a reception.
Jeez.
According to the stat I found online. He had 14 touchdowns his senior year, the year he won the Heisman, and over 900 yards in 9 games. So 6 yards per carry.
I wonder how many passes were thrown each game.
Yeah, I'm curious.
It's still an impressive stat. They
threw
the ball a little.
I'm curious.
Least,
I didn't look into it. I'm curious if it was like it seemed pretty often that back then that it was running back by committee. That it wasn't just the one guy that ran the ball a lot.
Like 2 or 3 halfbacks and a fullback.
Yeah.
Any of them could throw on any play.
Yeah. I didn't even say his name. Howard Hopalong Cassidy. I mean, a big reason I picked him was because his nickname's Hopalong. I think that's hilarious. Great name. Loved it.
Yeah. Number 3 for me, 5,606 yards from scrimmage, 5,040 rushing yards, 5 yards an attempt, 41 rushing touchdowns, but he was 0-4 against Ohio State. This blew my mind. So Mike Hart, leading into this, like as I was beginning to make the list, what I did is I put a bunch of running backs on there from Michigan, and then I would move them up and down as I was researching each of them. Mm-hmm. Just your memory is sometimes different than what actually happened.
Right.
Stats. Mike Hart was a pretty formative running back for me for Michigan, and I still remember most of the other ones, or at least highlights, or them in the NFL, whatever. Mm-hmm. It was just really big for me. His 0-4 against Ohio State just that wasn't what pushed him down all the way, but he also 41 rushing touchdowns. We'll see as we go. My 2-1, so he had fewer rushing touchdowns, less yards per carry than one of them. So he is Michigan's all-time leading rusher. I love Mike Hart still.
Yeah,
but he's number 3 for me. It's hard. I feel
crazy.
I said to my wife, "Oh my gosh, I have Mike Hart number 3," and she said, "Who?"
Wow. Number 3 for me for Ohio State. I think it's funny. Now that I think about it, I think he has a better argument for number 1 to challenge who's number 1 than who's number 2. But he didn't ever win a Heisman. He never had those big single season accolades. But I think it's a huge factor when he had over 1,800 yards twice.
Man.
Ran for over 200 yards in each of the Buckeyes' final 3 games of the season as they went on a national championship run. So obviously he was a huge part of that. He also had 8 total touchdowns in those 3 games. I don't think you could argue that anyone was more of a factor in their 2014 national championship season than Ezekiel Elliott, and that's why I have him number 3. Just an amazing run. I mean, got to be one of the best runs in college football history to have against a top 15 Wisconsin team, run for over 200 yards. And then Alabama, Nick Saban, all-time coach, ran for over 200 yards. And then Oregon, who was number 1, I think. No, they were number 2 going into that playoff. But going for 200 yards and 4 touchdowns in the national championship game.
Like
It's pretty incredible.
Big Ten championship and then the playoff.
Yeah.
3 of the biggest games possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean that.
And it was the first
sucks.
playoff of all time, so all the attention was on him in the first playoff.
Yeah,
Pretty crazy.
it's too bad.
Yeah.
Mine.
He also had 6.7 yards per carry in his career, an amazing stat as well.
Yeah, that's insane. My number 2 from 1997 to 2000, Anthony the A-Train Thomas. 4,848 yards from scrimmage, 4,098 rushing yards, 4.8 per carry, 49 rushing touchdowns, 3-1 against Ohio State was big. He was a freshman on the national championship team, ran for 500 or 600 yards that season. So he was a freshman, and I think he was the backup. He played some.
Yeah.
But Anthony that's it.
Number 2 for me, another Heisman winning running back. Honestly, the more I think about it, I kind of want to put him at 3, but I put him at number 2, and I'll stick with it. At the end of his career, he finished with the second most rushing yards to number 1 in his career. He's not number 2 anymore because he's been passed by a couple of guys. He had over 4,000 all-purpose yards, 44 rushing touchdowns, 5.5 yards per carry. Eddie George also holds the record for the most yards per game in a single season with 148 yards in his Heisman-winning season per game. I have Eddie George as number 2. Great running back.
Nice. So now we're going to do honorable mention before we reveal our number 1s.
Yeah.
Your number 1 is a huge secret. But I have 3 honorable mentions. Jamie Morris is considered one of the great running backs in Michigan history. 4,392 rushing yards, about 800 receiving yards, 5.4 yards per carry. But this was big for me. He only had 25 rushing touchdowns.
Wow.
That's crazy. So, that's less than my top 4 for sure. It was hard to find some stats on Tom Harmon.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could have if I looked harder, but whatever. Jamie Morris, the touchdowns knocked him down. And then similarly, Tim Biakabatuka. So he had 2,716 rushing yards, one of the great names in college football history, 6.1 yards per carry.
Wow.
But he only had 24 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
That was just surprising to me looking back. And then my 3rd, Denard Robinson, a quarterback.
Yeah.
But so this is crazy to me. Jamie Morris was honorable mention, right? Denard Robinson had more rushing yards than Tyrone Wheatley, than Anthony Thomas, than Chris Perry. Mike Hart is the only one on my list with more rushing yards than Denard Robinson. He's number 2 all time in Michigan rushing yards. 6.2 yards per carry. He also had just over 6,000 yards passing, 10,745 total yards, 42 rushing touchdowns, 49 passing touchdowns. Just for some perspective. So we think of mobile quarterbacks, you got to think Mike Vick, right? He only had 1,299 rushing yards in his 2 years, 17 touchdowns, and he threw for 3,299 passing yards, 21 touchdowns passing. Or we could think Lamar Jackson, right?
Yeah.
He had fewer rushing yards than Denard Robinson. He had 4,132 rushing yards. He did have 50 touchdowns. He had a lot of passing yards and touchdowns. I'm not saying Denard is better than Lamar Jackson, just for perspective. J.T. Barrett was short. He had 3,263 rushing yards, but he was short. So
I'm pretty sure he was an average height for
honorable mention, Denard Robinson, 4,495 rushing yards as a quarterback. I miss him.
I have a quarterback on my honorable mention list too.
It's crazy to think though. So he had Rich Rod for his first 2 years. His sophomore year was better. If you go back, look at the stats, his sophomore year was pretty good. It pains me to think the team had a good year in Brady Hoke's first year, but he also wasn't utilized to his strengths. And it's kind of painful to think about what could have been. Not if Rich Rod was there necessarily, but if they had a spread coach for his junior and senior years,
Yeah.
those numbers would be better.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever. Who do you got for your honorable mentions?
Okay, so first on my honorable mention, this is a guy that he transferred to Ohio State, only played there one season, was never really took the clear role as the starter until the Big Ten championship game. He kind of shared time with another running back. But in that Big Ten championship game, he set the single-game rushing record with 331 yards for Ohio State. Nobody ran for more yards in a game in Buckeye history. So Trey Sermon is my first honorable mention. He didn't have the career or anything else that could have put him close to the list, but he's really I'm starting from the bottom up with my honorable mention list. My next one is also a quarterback, Braxton Miller. Mm-hmm. He played a little bit of H-back or whatever
he and Denard both got hurt.
Yeah,
and switched away from quarterback late in their career.
That's one what if I would love to see is that Ohio State national championship season. If Braxton Miller was the quarterback that whole year, to see what they would have done, to see if they still would have won. I think they still would have won the national championship, but it'd have been just because Braxton Miller was one of my favorite players all time. It would have been cool to see him win that national championship play.
The injury thing I didn't even honestly think about until now, but Denard hurt his elbow, his funny bone, and missed most of his senior year. Like they ended up playing him, but he said he couldn't grip the ball in that arm because of that nerve getting hurt. So, I mean, that also, he wasn't quarterback, but he also just didn't get the ball, period. So those numbers are really short. Most of the year.
Yeah, Braxton Miller, going into his at the end of his junior year, hurt his shoulder in the bowl game.
Right.
Got surgery. Then, I think 2 weeks before his senior year, was supposed to be his senior year, hurt that same shoulder again, his throwing shoulder. Was out the whole year again. Was out the whole year, not again, but was able to come back because of that injury, but played H-back. But he's just one of the most elusive players. He's in the players I've ever seen in the top 10 in career rush yards in Buckeye history, and I just had to put him on this list. When I think of plays of players just making people look stupid, I think of so many plays. So many plays come to mind of Braxton Miller just juking or spinning the crap out of people.
Yeah.
Next on my honorable mention list is Carlos Hyde. He's a great running back in Buckeye history. Mainly, I put him on this list because he's got one of the highest yards per carry averages in Buckeye history with 6.1. Not as much as some of these guys that ended up on the list where like J.K. Dobbins had 6.2, Zeke had 6.7. I don't know what Archie had. I don't know if I have that on here, but I'll have to look. I'll have to figure that out sometime. But Carlos Hyde 6.1 yards per carry in his career. He had an illustrious career with Braxton Miller in that backfield was scary. Read option.
That's
what are you gonna do? Who are you gonna guard? And then the last player on my list, he's the all-time leading Buckeye in career rushing touchdowns. Pete Johnson had 56 rushing touchdowns in his career. Pretty incredible.
That's crazy.
But he just missed out on my list.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, our number one running backs of all time.
Yeah.
My number one, Tyrone Wheatley.
Wow.
True story, I met Tyrone Wheatley, kind of. Me and my wife were at a basketball game. It's when he was coaching under Harbaugh. He had just come. And we were walking down the concourse, and I said to my wife, holy crap, there's Tyrone Wheatley. And Tyrone Wheatley goes, how you doing? And he kept walking. He was with some recruits. And
That's
I was
awesome.
like, Tyrone Wheatley, that's crazy. But 4,688 yards from scrimmage from 91 to 94, 2-2 versus Ohio State, 4,178 rushing yards, so 6.1, 47 rushing touchdowns, 6 receiving touchdowns. Tyrone Wheatley. I mean, honestly, he was number 2 or 3 going in, and then as I looked at the stats, I was like, underrated in my own mind. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, in a lot of the lists that I was looking up in my research, almost everybody had Mike Hart number 1.
Yeah.
I had Mike Hart number 1. And then looking at it, Tyrone Wheatley, I honestly, I want to go back and watch some of his highlights because I was 5 years old his freshman year. So I want to go back and look at some Tyrone Wheatley highlights. Who's your number 1? Here we go.
My number 1, Archie Griffin.
Look at the suspense.
Wow.
Two-time Heisman winner. Goodness gracious.
Not a surprise at all.
No.
I think the crazy stat about Archie Griffin is, like, at the time, this is unheard of. Not really unheard of, but not expected.
Yeah.
He was a freshman. In his second game, he ran for 239 yards as a freshman. Like, back then, that wasn't really a thing.
Yeah.
You kind of waited for your time to step in there. He's the only player in Ohio State history to lead the team in rushing for 4 straight seasons. Archie is also the only player in college football history to have 2 Heisman trophies. He has the Buckeye record for 5,589 career rushing yards. He won 4 Big Ten titles and started in 4 Rose Bowls. They also won multiple unclaimed national titles while he was there, and it's just an incredible career. And obviously, between the 2 lists, the best running back.
Yeah. No, you can't argue with 2 Heismans.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, and I mean, he's in the conversation for best running back of all time, college running back of all time.
Man. Our next list, top 3 performances in the game by a running back. Honestly, I kept going between all 3 of these performances that I picked as the best performance of all time in the game by a Michigan running back. And my 1 to 3 was constantly shifting and changing as I would look. I'd be like, that can't be number 3. Well, then that one can't be number 3. That one, whatever. And I broke them up a little bit differently. I didn't rank them 1 through 3. I just broke them up into 3 different categories that each is the greatest in their own right.
Yeah. So
maybe it's not fair, but
you want me to start with number 3 and then you go with one
Sure.
of yours? All right. So I actually ranked mine. Number 3 for me is Bob Ferguson. He ran for 152 yards and 4 touchdowns and a 50-20 victory in the game, and just a great game with 4 touchdowns, 150 yards. That's all I have to say about that.
Man. So one of my categories, most dominant, I talked about it a little bit earlier, but Tom Harmon in 1940 rushed for 3 touchdowns, threw for 2 touchdowns. He also had 3 interceptions. As I mentioned, kicked 4 extra
3
points.
interceptions.
He rightfully got a standing ovation.
Yeah.
I mean, rightfully, but it's from Columbus by the Ohio State fans. That won't happen ever again.
You'd think after the second interception, the coach would go, "Don't throw it near him."
That's just insane.
But 3 in 1 game, that's incredible.
Yeah. He left the game with 38 seconds left, got the standing ovation. They won 40-0. Good year. Who's your number 2?
Number 2 for me is it was surprisingly a close game in the rivalry's history. It came at a time when Ohio State was really dominating the rivalry, still is dominating the rivalry, even though they lost last year. Carlos Hyde ran for 226 yards in 2013, a 42-41 victory where Gardner threw the 2-point conversion interception.
With a broken foot. He played that game with a broken foot.
He had an incredible game that game, too.
Let's talk about that game really quick. No, I don't want to. Just Al Borges. Michigan lines up for the 2-point conversion. Devin Gardner has a broken foot. Ohio State calls timeout. Michigan comes back out in the same formation.
Wow.
The guy that picked it off said, "I knew what play was coming." Wow. Al Borges, ladies and gentlemen. Goodness gracious. My most yards. Tamanga Biakabatuka, 1995, 37 carries, 313 yards.
Wow.
This was surprising to me. I knew 313 yards, 1 touchdown. How do you run for that many yards and score once?
That's crazy.
Michigan won 31-23.
Maybe they were trying to pad some other guy's stats.
Maybe
he'd run out with the one to
there
get
was
somebody else a
there was a
touchdown.
Ben Mason type. Or stealing touchdowns at the end.
Or just maybe they had like a Rudy on their team that they wanted to get him a touchdown or something.
That could be. This was a fun stat I found from the Cleveland Plain Dealer talking about the game.
Yeah.
Terry Glenn, guaranteed a win before the game, said he would exploit a certain freshman cornerback from Michigan by the name Charles Woodson.
Boy, was he wrong.
He had 4 first-half catches, but in the second half, Terry Glenn had 2 catches. Charles Woodson had 2 interceptions.
Wow.
In the second half, Woodson had 2 interceptions. Terry Glenn, 0 catches. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, this is amazing to me, started out the article. It had all the finesse of a brakeless beer truck and all the trickery of a time bomb. So no wonder it left Ohio State flat as day-old cola.
Wow.
That's just great writing. Biaka Batuka said after the game, "I've been playing football for 6 years, not that long, including high school. and I've never seen holes like that. Any one of you guys could have run through them.
Wow. I think the thing that I remember most from that game, I don't remember it obviously, but I've seen there's a documentary I've seen where it's like, I don't know what it's called. It's like The Game, and it's the history of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, and that's one game that they really cover. And I can just remember hearing, I don't know if it was the radio call or the TV call or whatever, and it's just whoever's the announcer is just going, there goes Tim Bianca Batuka, and it's just like over and over him saying his name. And
37 carries, he got a lot. Mm-hmm. Almost 10 yards a carry. That's insane.
And I'm a name guy, so if I were to make a list,
Batuka's just great.
If I were to make a list with Ohio State players and Michigan players, he'd be on that list for me.
He's good. One of the most impressive things to me, 37 carries. They knew he was going to get the ball, and he's still 313 yards. That's great. And you're number one.
In a game where Ohio State ran for over 400 yards, this guy led the team in rushing yards and had 4 touchdowns. And it was actually the famous game where they asked Woody Hayes, why'd you go for 2? And he said, because I couldn't go for 3. Ohio State stomped 4th-ranked Michigan. Ohio State was ranked 2. Michigan was ranked 4. So it's a big game going into the game. They stomped them 50-14 on their way to a national championship victory in the Rose Bowl. Jim Otis just led the way in a dominant game against a team that was clearly overrated. Fun fact about the go for 2 thing is I actually learned when I was looking this up that they actually only went for 2 because their center got hurt and the kicker was the backup center. So they didn't have anyone to snap the ball when the kicker would be kicking.
It would be terrible to risk, 48.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want that.
But, it's just an incredible game and an incredible season. Clearly, they won the national championship that year. And 400 rush yards when you're leading the way in that pack, it's hard to deny that's a good game.
My last category, one of the top 3 performances of all-time Michigan running back, had to be Hassan Haskins. Most touchdowns, 28 carries, 169 yards, 5 touchdowns, and obviously 42-27 victory. But you might go back like I do and watch the highlights of that game once every hour or so. And it's fun how there's one clip. So there's his last touchdown. Ohio State lets him score. They pull up. There's almost an identical clip. And it's his 3rd or 4th touchdown. They didn't want to get run over by the train again.
Apparently.
Hassan Haskins. That's fun.
They had the flu.
Tweet of the week. They also played in a blizzard. Heavy accumulation. Tweet of the week. We actually tried to record this last week, so my tweet of the week is from 2 weeks ago. But whatever. I just liked it. I didn't want to move off it. Mine's from Scott Bell. They're replaying Michigan-Wisconsin on ESPNU right now. If Michigan doesn't pass the ball more this time, I'm going to be furious. You're not going to beat Ohio State by just running the ball. That's a good follow-up from Hassan Haskins, 5 touchdowns.
That's funny.
Oh,
my tweet of the week comes from Keenan Bailey. I don't know who the heck he is, but he said, "Go to the school where you'll start right away and be the guy, or join the best unit in the nation where first round is the standard and where competition drives the development. So proud." And then it's a picture, I think at practice, of Garrett Wilson, Olave, Jamison Williams, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I'm pretty sure Brian Hartline, they pointed everyone out in the picture, as you'll see. But Brian Hartline, whoever the coach is standing there isn't named, but just see the back of him. But it's just funny. 4 guys that 3 of them already went in the top 13. Jackson Smith and Jigba I've seen mocked as high as number 1 overall.
He's good.
Going first overall, first overall. He's almost right now certainly a lock to be a top 10 pick, barring anything crazy. Just 4 guys that just shows how good Brian Hartline's been as the wide receiver coach at Ohio State, and I think they should give him however much money he wants to keep him there forever.
I just like Jamison Williams' quote where he says, "When I graduate, it's going to be from Alabama, not Ohio State."
Yeah, he also said that Ohio State fans disowned him and blah blah blah, bashed on him for leaving. But then you go look at his transfer announcement and everyone wishes him luck. But
I don't know. Maybe he was getting some DMs.
Yeah,
of some
I'm
hateful
not.
fans.
I'm not saying saying the Jameson Williams thing as like, oh, credit Ohio State. I'm more of saying it as credit Brian Hartline because he was a huge
on the
play.
team at
Huge,
one point.
He was a huge play in development.
Ohio State's not what got him drafted, but he was there at one point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Ohio State got him drafted.
I mean, Derek Jeter was committed to Michigan at one point, too. He just didn't play for him. So, who recruited 3 of those receivers? Urban Meyer. I'm just thankful for their sakes that he left, because who knows if they would have come down with, like, injuries from getting kicked in the weight room or something. Yeah. So, thank you, Ryan Day, for not being, as far as we know, super abusive.
Terry McLaurin, Michael Thomas, Paris Campbell, all those guys are fine.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot has been said about Urban Meyer. At least no one has said that Urban Meyer burned down a monastery filled with nuns.
I think, what?
No one has said Urban Meyer has burned down a monastery filled with nuns that all died.
I think my biggest point of this tweet, it just shows that Ohio State is wide receiver U, and there's no argument against it. Period.
Alabama, maybe.
Nah.
Okay. With that,
I mean, we could get an argument about it.
Maybe that'll be next episode. Who knows? Let us know if you want to see a certain list or argument.
We're gonna change the show to Crimson and Scarlet.
Maybe. I can't argue Michigan is right now. So with that, we'll see you probably not next week, but we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
More Scarlet and Maize. We have some exciting stuff coming up for the next season. Hopefully Michigan gets another big transfer commit for basketball, and it's not somebody leaving.
Yeah.
But with that, go Blue.
Go Buckeyes.